Shankar, instead of this normal market talk, I thought we'll go on a food trail.
Sure.
And we'll talk about how should, our viewers know that how should one invest the Shankar Sharma way. But today we'll talk about how should one really...
Especially in today's markets, these kinds of markets, we're all struggling for food.
So are you one of those who says that, look, I live to eat or I eat to live?
I live to eat. I really do.
Yeah?
Yeah. Food is very close to my heart and my wife's heart. So, and I'm sure you followed whatever I tweet. So, yeah.
So, some of those recommendations would be coming up as to what you like, what you eat. I'm a vegetarian, so I'm afraid I may not be able to savor some of your recommendations.
That's okay.
But what's that ultimate dish you would say you've eaten in India or outside India, which you would say is my all-time favorite?
There's no one dish, but one thing I always say is that you cannot eat badly in India. And trust me, I live in Dubai and obviously been around. But the kind of food you eat in Bombay, you get in Bombay. Particularly, I'm not talking about Indian food. It's more like the fusion of Indian versus Western food. That in Bombay, I think, is unparalleled. It's brilliant. And so many new restaurant openings. You're just spoiled for choice.
When I ask people which is your favorite dish, I always get this very cliched answer, "Maa ke haath ka khana." Is it true for you also?
Oh, not at all, not at all. My mother was a woman ahead of her time. She said that kitchen is not meant for me. And my father was a great cook. My mother never cooked. The only thing I remember is that she cooked one fish pie in my entire life of having known her. So there was no maa ka haath ka khana. I always preferred to eat out than eat in. Till date, I always prefer hotel food than home food. So yeah, for me, those typically Indian or even mom's cooking kind of thing, that never worked for me.
Have you ever cooked apart from boiling water? Maybe making
No. I cook. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm actually a pretty good cook.
So alternate profession. If not a stock
Not
market investor, I wanted to be a cook.
I can tell you, I can cook a lot better than many restaurants where you can, you pay a lot of money to eat. It's not difficult. Cooking is very simple. It's a matter of process, good ingredients. I think you will do well.
Buffett says that, look, I get up in the morning, I eat my burger, I enjoy my Coke, and I can do that 365 days in a year. I'm a great investor, but I love my food, and what I like about my food is that my habits don't change.
The only thing I envy about Warren Buffett, trust me, the only one thing, okay, is his genetics. Eating that crap, trash that he has eaten for so many decades, drinking sugary Coke and eating burgers. And he is,
87,
and he is batting like he can go on forever. Trust me, that really makes me completely envious. Not his wealth or his achievement. That's okay, we can all make a lot of money in context. But to live eating burgers and Coke and live to be 90 or whatever, 95, 100, God knows where he ends up with. Brilliant.
You've spent reasonable amount of time in Mumbai, even though you're not from Mumbai.
Yes.
But you must, knowing your habits and how experimental you are,
Yep.
By now you must have experimented all the small restaurants and the big fancy restaurants and the big hotels. So what comes on the top of your mind as the go-to place?
Well, I typically never go to five-star hotels. That's something I think they give you absolutely rubbish food, overpriced. And they serve mostly the foreigners who are coming in, who are not very, very knowledgeable about local food. It's really independent restaurants. And the table where we are shooting is a great place, one of my favorites. But there are many around Fort Colaba. And I live in South Bombay, so this is I do believe there are a lot of good restaurants in North Bombay, but I can never make that traffic trek there. But this side, Excellency is a great seafood restaurant. When I used to work out of Fountain in Fort, where one of our offices is still there, there are so many small eateries around. Apurva was there, or Ankur was there, Trishna was there. The whole Rampart Row area is now, teeming with small eateries. It just becomes so lively in South Bombay. You're just really spoiled for choice.
So how would you connect markets and food?
Well, we have to work very hard to support all this eating out, right? So Monday to Friday, that's what I spend a lot of time doing. To find money to spend on Saturday and Sunday.
There are 6,000 listed stocks, and a stock picker will be able to identify those 10, 15, maybe 50 stocks which would change the course of your life. That's not the case with food. It's easy to choose, you can be experimental, but when it comes to markets, you really have to go in depth, analyze, study.
It's the same in food. You have to keep an open mind. And, there are stuff that you might not ordinarily want to eat or have thought of eating. Like you go to China, you get served things that
You don't talk about it on camera.
Exactly. It's not polite to talk about those things. But I've not gone to the extremes, but I've kept an open mind in the middle, and some of them are fairly interesting things to have eaten. So in markets, to keep an open mind. I mean, that's what I always say, that the biggest pitfalls that as investors I'm equally prey to that. It's not that I have some special skill that makes me go away from that. We all get sort of straight-jacketed in our thinking and in our approaches and philosophy. While in markets, something works for some time, but nothing works all the time. So you either have growth or value or momentum, or you have to move with the times. So the one thing I really want to always keep doing is to remain flexible, not to become hardened in my approach. So
what do you think is the style currently, and what style could work for next 2 or 3 years?
I mean, over the last several years, what I have found working, is that India went through a big debt cycle. So we found indebted companies who had ways to fix their debt. Secondarily, we found managements who had made big mistakes in their earlier parts of their lives, and everybody makes mistakes. But as long as the mistakes were genuine and they made amends and corrected their problems, it's time to give them a relook. Because in markets, we kind of get fixated that, no, this company had X problem, I'll never look at it again. That's nonsense. Companies come back. Businesses are not dead things. They are alive. They are changing. That's exactly where I say that you have to have an open mind. So I find managements who are 50 plus, who have gone through a cycle of really bad decisions, assuming there's no fraud. I mean, that of course, as I've always said, when there is fraud, then all bets are off. But business problems, bad decisions, all of us do that. Second time around, I find that they play a lot better. So usually, and there are many companies in the debt problem, you've seen many companies go through big sort of problematic first phases. But hopefully there will be far better businessmen in the second. I mean, one promoter always tells me that, I really learned what is business at the age of 48. I wish I had had this wisdom at 28 when I thought I could rule the world and walk on water. When my father called me back from the US to run my business. And I said, I've done my MBA and I know everything. You old man, you get out of the way. And then I left the company dead. And my father said, to do this, why did I need to call you from the US? But now people learn. They become better the second time around.
A lot of people say that, habits don't change, and if I can use the Hindi terminology, kutte ki dum kabhi seedhi nahi hoti hai. Do you think we should not look at past as the indicator of future performance for markets, for promoters, for businesses?
By that token, you shouldn't have bought Amazon or Apple. Both of them had terrible first innings of their lives. Terrible. I mean, Steve Jobs left Apple in tatters, came back, it was still in tatters. 7 years after he had rejoined, it was still in tatters. By that token, you should have never bought Apple. Okay? Jeff Bezos started in 96. By 2002 or 3, the company was virtually bankrupt. I mean, just because they are sitting in the US, we will say, no, they don't have to answer to the same rules. Fact is that they also messed up in the first part. They came back very strongly. You would have been dumb not to have taken a look at them again. And in India, there are many examples of companies turning around. I mean, Jindal is a good example. Lupin is a very good example. I mean, all these companies are considered untouchables in the early part of the 2000s. Go back in time.
Marwadi companies.
Memories blur. We forget things. We start to ascribe the last data point as indicator of whether he's a god or a devil. And I say that's nonsensical. Go back and see in the first phase of the Jindal's life, they were not considered top-notch management. Lupins were not considered respectable at all by any standards. Tata's, nobody gave a chance in Titan that they don't know anything about the consumer business. I mean, think about it. Which consumer businesses have the Tatas done? Nothing. Zero. When they started Titan and started making watches, and I know their project very well in the 90s, we never used to believe that Tatas could ever do anything sensible in the mass consumer market. Selling LCVs is different. I mean, they couldn't even sell cars properly, right?
Titan had a problem of existence.
Exactly right. For nearly 10 years of its existence. Then suddenly one fine day it came back. So you have to have an open mind. Companies are not static organisms. They change, they morph.
There's a data which I read, and it's just a coincidence that we're talking about too much of Buffett today. It says that Buffett has made 99% of its wealth after he turned 60.
Correct.
You're not 60. But the best of Shankar Sharma is yet to come there.
I mean, that's true for Soros too.
Yes.
Okay. I think there is a lot of merit in this data. I think it makes sense. I see my own thinking having changed a lot over the years. It's also to do with, the environment you are in. So having been through 25, 30 years of cycles, you are more relaxed about things. I mean, so if the market falls 25, the stocks fall 25, 30%, you have a context of data to put things in rather than just react immediately and say, gosh, this is game over. So I just think your wisdom increases. I mean, it's as simple. I mean, look at it this way in cricket. Okay? Now players are playing till their late 30s, if not their early 40s. Right? I mean, and frankly, I think this generation could play till the mid 40s, right?
Fitness levels.
Because if your fitness levels are good and your brain has evolved as a cricketer, you got so many more matches to analyze in your own life. You will become better when you're past 30, past 35, past 37. You're able to handle conditions, bowling, all kinds of variables much better. You have so much data in front of you.
That's what I've always admired about you, that you're very flexible. You reflect on your mistakes and you learn from your mistakes. And I've known your good investments and bad investments.
I do that every day.
And it's quite remarkable that you're not a stubborn investor who says, look, these are my rules and I will not change irrespective of what happens.
I don't have any rules. I mean, the only rule is that you have to be very honest with yourself. You have to face up.
Even though we don't have any rules on the show, but there is something called a break, which is a commercial obligation.
Yeah,
that's the rule I have to take on the food.
You must.
So I'm going to take a break. We want to keep all the food talk. It's very appetizing to stand in table and not really savor the food here. So that is what me and Shankar plan to do after this break. I'm curious to know that what is the lighter side of Shankar Sharma?
Well, I hang out and enjoy my food and my wine and music, yeah? Like normal.
How has life changed for you ever since you moved to Dubai?
Like I said, I always like living in India and I love living in the city of Bombay. I mean, this is like I've been here for 30 years. Best years of my life have been spent here. The city has given me everything. So for me, this is the city. This is my Mecca, my El Dorado. So Dubai is good. I mean, in a sense, an extension of India, but not a patch on Bombay, no question.
How do you see your life evolving in next 10 years? You've taken some very big steps. When you were in 20s, you decided to move into the stockbroking business.
Yeah.
Then came this entire TMT opportunity and the TMT bubble. You were right ahead of the curve when you bought stocks like HFCL, ahead of the curve when you also came on public platforms and said, look, there's a bubble in making. The boom and the bust of 2008 also, you were right ahead of the curve. So these are market factors which have changed the course of your life. How do you think, what is the next course of your life?
The next course of my life is, obviously investing is close to heart. And I find that there is nothing in this world which is more liberating or more relaxing than managing your own money. Because the pressures there are only internal. You don't have to justify transactions to anybody. You don't have to explain to anybody why something has worked, why it's not worked, etc., etc. And you can live life at your own terms. And I think ultimately every person's objective of life is that you should be able to live life at your own terms. And I think investing gives you that. At the same time, I think every single day, I end up learning something I didn't know yesterday in terms of diversity of companies or promoters. And of course, the other big change that I now see, and hopefully it will accentuate, is that now after having seen 25, 30 years of different businesses, the mistakes companies made, you're better able to guide the companies where you invest in, because our model is somewhat great or somewhat good. So therefore, there's a lot of mentoring involved, a lot of discussion involved. It's important for them not to make huge mistakes. And therein your experience helps, because you have data banks which the promoter typically won't have. He might be an engineer, an MBA, or might have done something for 5, 10 years. But the long-term histories that you have seen, experienced, profited from or lost from, That they will not have.
So have you made any large investments in the last 6 months?
No, I'm looking at a lot, but some of them are close to being done.
So what is stopping you? Price or capital?
No, it's just understanding the companies. I mean, we take time over investing. There's a management that came to meet us the other day, and it's a NCLT kind of situation. And you get 270 days in that. And they said, would you be interested in buying out the company or something of that sort? When I said, look, it'll take us time to understand, first of all, what the problem was. And if at all we end up doing it, it's going to take like 8-9 months for us to figure it out.
Do you have a sweet tooth?
Yeah. Huge sweet tooth. But I eat only Indian sweets, so I don't eat Western sweets. I don't like chocolate much and all that. But give me jalebi or gulab jamun, I'll eat tons of it.
So, we always talk about the what tip when we do a market show. So give me a food tip today for a vegetarian like me.
Being vegetarian is against my religious beliefs. You will not believe it, and I'm not exaggerating. I eat no vegetarian food at all. Okay. My family forces me to eat a bit of vegetables. And every day, my guy will ask me, what sabzi to make, and I say, don't even ask me because I'm not interested. I'll pick at it, I'll probably leave it. Or even if I eat it, it'll be very half-hearted. So I'm sorry, but I really cannot give you any tips on that. You ask me about what I eat, I can tell you a lot about it.
So I'm going to take the conversation, let's try and connect a little bit on markets because, when you come on TV, you hardly come on TV, but when you come on TV, our viewers expect you to come up with something new, something different. So, there's some classic dishes which you would say are all-time favorite. There are some dishes where you would say I'm only experimental. And there are some dishes where you have decided that, look, I like them, but I don't like the price of them. So let's talk about markets. How would you break the market in these categories? What would you say is the classic all-time business? What would you say is just a appetizer? More like, I'm going to test it, not marry that company or that business. And what you like, but you don't like the price.
I mean, to answer the third question first, industry companies like Lever and all, you cannot not like. So the consumer business, what Warren Buffett has made his name, we understand the logic, but somehow in India, the pricing has always been something I have never been able to rationalize or figure out. I've never owned a single share of Hindustan Lever or Colgate or anything of that sort. Many people have, they've profited handsomely, but we've never found guts to buy something at 60, 80 times earnings. Now they have corrected a bit, but they're still very pricey. Infrastructure is something which is the second question. Not something I like, but I just think the first phase of companies got over. The second phase of companies, the road builders, hopefully, would have learned the lessons. So it's not a great business, but I think it's a good time. And the first ones, of course, are, your autos and stuff like that, because I've always believed in this goes back nearly a decade and a half, that, and not difficult. India under-penetrated in two-wheelers, even more so under-penetrated in four-wheelers. I remember having done a piece in 2008 or something where I think car ownership was like 2% of the population or something like that. It's going to go to 10%, right? That's enough. That's enough to make several times your money. And how many players are there anyway? There's just a handful of 3-4 players. It's not that foreign company is about to come. Everybody who could come is already here, and one guy is hanging on to a 50% market share. It didn't take much to figure it out. So, two-wheelers we've liked, Bajaj Auto we've liked for decades now. I've said it publicly, I consider the best management in India, because not just autos, they've proven themselves in financial services.
But they missed on scooters.
I think that was a huge mistake. And I think, for all the good work that Rajiv Bajaj has done, sometimes you can be too creative. And I think that was a bit of excessive, creativity. Even when, and I'm not saying it is the benefit of hindsight, even when they did it, I was of the view that I think this is not a smart move.
You believe in the power of cycles. And we've been in this earnings downtrend for a while now. Why is the cycle not picking?
Well, that's a little bit of a, trickery here, because broadly the cycle has not picked up, but the sectors that have been doing well, like autos or banks, etc., their numbers have been good. And if you see, those are the very stocks that are doing well. But you clearly don't expect big embattled debt-ridden companies to do well. So you have the ADAC group, which has obviously been very weighed down by debt without any catalyst of earnings. I mean, that's not going to revive. I mean, that's very clear. But companies which didn't have debt, you have the auto pack, they're not having debt at all. They have been doing very well over the years, or consumers for that matter. So earnings growth is very patchy. Okay, but when you take it in an overall sense, it averages out to almost nothing. But sectorally, some sectors have had very good earnings growth.
So just to wrap it up, and I'm going to focus on only food after that.
Okay.
We like to think that you should find good ideas, cheeky ideas, try to find the next multi-bagger idea. That's what the endeavor is, So the sense which we get when we talk to our viewers and the kind of feedback we get from our viewers, that was agda bada idea nikalo. But you think in India, just keep it simple, buy autos, some consumer names, buy these stocks when markets are bad, and just, sit tight?
No, I mean, that's for, I mean, like I always say that what
for
might
an average investor.
What might be good for me or relevant for me is not necessarily relevant for somebody who is not doing it full time. Not possible. But I maintained the small caps look great for 3-4 years, and I continue to maintain that. I mean, I think even now, there's so many, and people talk about valuation fraud in small caps, so that they've run up. Yeah, they've run up, but earnings growth in some of them is just off the charts. And now they're trading like 10, 12, 15 times 1 year out earnings, I mean, rather current year earnings.
After the sell-off.
After the sell-off, I mean, that's not bad at all. And my view is this, and I've said this in a recent interview to a paper, which 2008 was very good data. If you're a student of markets, that was brilliant data. A year which I don't think we are ever going to see again, 65% down market. In that market also, the only stocks that did worse than the market were companies with debt. If you went to the companies which were fundamentally strong, then they fell only some 30-odd%, and they didn't have debt. Okay, and the worst of them, like some M&M, which didn't have debt but has some rural, etc., only fell 50%. Imagine in a cataclysmic year, good stocks fall tops of 30, 35, 40%. Therefore, and we have seen good stocks fall 40% in the last, let's say, 4-5 months. That's the bottom. That is the bottom. As long as there is no debt on the balance sheet, good stock, good earnings outlook, or at least intact earnings outlook, and then they are down 30-35%. It's a no-brainer, because even in 2008 they didn't fall more than that.
So thumb rule is buy companies which have no debt and where the selling is about 25-30%.
And earnings outlook is intact.
Of course, and the promoter has to be decent enough, or has to be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously those hygiene
hygiene
checks have to be there, right? But I'm saying if those have fallen in a market correction 30%, I think it's a no-brainer.
That's it on this edition of Market Makers. Thank you for tuning in.